money. I guess for the city attorney's office, I do have a couple questions. It's my understanding that the police department currently is implementing the Attorney General's guidelines in terms of its enforcement. Is this a correct statement?
Yes, Chief Solis at PS and NS did state that the police department was following the state Attorney General guidelines.
So in
addition to the guidelines that are in our municipal code.
So the voters voted on Proposition 215. Now, whether you're for or against, that Prop 215 has certain definitions and certain provisions that allow for patients and primary caregivers to grow their own marijuana and use it for medicinal purposes?
Basically, yes. What it does is allow patients and caregivers under certain circumstances to not be arrested for certain offenses under the Health and Safety Code. And
the next step of the process was the state attorney general opined in a memoranda of law certain regulations that municipalities would look to in creating enforcement mechanisms to comply with this state law, correct?
Correct, yeah. From the state perspective, there was the Prop 215, then there was what's commonly known as SB 420, which was state legislation further implementing, and then, yes, most recently the State Attorney General's guidelines interpreting both those sets of regulations.
The only other area where the municipal government perhaps would have a role, and I'm talking about municipal government meaning the city government, would be in land use decisions. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, in addition to being able to set the amounts of marijuana that a patient or caregiver could possess, which we have already set forth those in our municipal code. Okay. But so long as we don't go below what the state allows, we can allow further amounts.
And as it relates to our decisions on land use, it's my understanding that the Development Services Department has put forward an indefinite suspension on any additional permits for dispensaries. Is that correct?
I'm not sure indefinite suspension is actually the correct legal term for it. What our Development Services has done is looked at our land use development code and has determined that there is no appropriate existing use for medical marijuana dispensaries, as they're referred to in cooperatives, collectives. So to the extent that what DSD is saying is that they are not going to approve that use, it is in effect, I guess, a suspension, but it's not a kind of a legal action.
And I'm holding in my hand something that was given to us during public testimony this morning, and this will be my last question. It lists about 40 dispensaries around the city in different council districts. I don't know if you've seen this, but I will submit it to you. Is this a good representation of how many dispensaries we already have authorized throughout the city?
You know, I've only heard anecdotally from other people that it's somewhere, around 40. I believe our Development Services Department says there's actually 8 officially registered with business taxes, but the police department would be the more accurate source of a true number.
Okay, I know I'm out of time. I want to thank you and the City Attorney's Office for doing your best to answer these questions, even though the police department's not here. I also want the record to reflect that I'm not criticizing the police department for not being here. I'm just making note that they are not here to answer some of these questions.
Still council member question time. I'll have a few questions too before we get to public comment, but I do see that my colleague Ms. Leitner would like to ask some questions.
I had a question relative to the DSD suspension or the failure to find an appropriate use. And are there any currently permitted uses in the city of San Diego?
I'm going to ask Shannon Thomas, my colleague who works directly with DSD, to come assist on these questions.
I'm not sure what you mean by any permitted uses. I don't know if that's a direct quote from what you said.
It sounded as if DSD made a unilateral decision to stop issuing these permits, and I'd like to understand if that's correct or not. Are there any permitted uses for the medical marijuana in this city right now?
The municipal code does give the city manager the authority and discretion to look at a proposed use and determine if it fits within any of the existing uses that are in the municipal code. The Development Services Director did that and made the determination that a medical marijuana dispensary does not fit into an existing allowed use. The next step is then for an applicant to go to the Planning Commission and have the Planning Commission make that determination, or if they cannot, then the applicant can initiate a rezone to accommodate that use.
So there are no medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of San Diego?
I did not say that.
Well, what I want to know is, I think this is a fairly recent decision on the part of Development Services Department Director, and I'd like to know if there were any permitted prior to his decision.
Well, I believe that there were, but obviously that department is not here to speak to that issue.
Councilmember Leitner, I think it goes back to the issue that Ms. Nuesca was conveying, that our office doesn't keep track of business tax certificates that are issued or any permits that are issued. Again, Development Services or the Police Department would probably be in a better position to respond to your question directly. We can let you know what the municipal code says, but we don't keep track of what's authorized by the city.
Well, I'm a bit concerned by seemingly unilateral action that has not been to council, and a decision that's made that this use may have existed before that decision was made and now it no longer exists, or as a permitted use it's no longer available.
I can point out that Kelly Broughton's memo from July 27th does refer to 8 active business tax certificates issued. So as of that date, that's what the status was.
Councilmember Leitner, you finished? Councilmember Fry. Shall we wait till comment? Okay. I will have some, I'll ask a couple of questions now that have been forwarded to me by various members of my community, some of which I think my colleagues got to. But Ms. Thomas and Ms. Nuesca, there is no zoning category that currently exists right now in the city of San Diego?
There is no zoning category for a marijuana or cannabis dispensary or distribution or transfer or any of those type of activities.
And so if there's no category, that means that there's no ability to differentiate where these could be located currently.
That was the Development Services Director's determination.
So they could open anywhere?
No, because it's not a permitted use. There will be no zoning use certificates issued for that activity.
No, and one of the questions that my colleagues were getting to in terms of the permitted use, one of the questions that has come up, if, in your opinion, is would the DSD suspension, if you will, if that's the right terminology, will that prevent additional operations from opening in the city of San Diego currently?
It will prevent them from opening with a business tax certificate.
And if they choose to open without a business tax certificate, what happens?
They are in violation of the municipal code.
Are they required to stop operating?
They are, if they are required to not operate to begin with without the business tax certificate. What enforcement actions the city may take once that violation comes to their attention probably depends on a lot of factors that I could only speculate on. How many other violations of a more serious nature are in front of the department? There's a lot of factors that go into enforcement.
And has there been any that have been, has that issue arisen with any, I think one of the things that we're seeing is those that have a license or a tax certificate versus those that don't. How do you track that?
Well, if they don't have a business tax certificate, then I assume that there would be reports made to code enforcement or to the treasurer's office and ultimately to code enforcement that a business may be operating without the proper business tax certificate. It happens from time to time in all areas of business that somebody doesn't know or willfully does not obtain the tax certificate.
Okay. And I'm going to be interested in listening to members of the public as well, but that issue has come up to me in the last several weeks. It seems like more and more in terms of businesses that are operating and what is the difference for those that have it, those that don't, and how does that work? And particularly, and I'll save some of my comments for the end, the issue of land use and where that occurs, where it should occur, where it shouldn't occur, seems to be a growing issue, at least certainly out in in my district. Are there any other questions at this point from any members of the council? Yeah, Councilmember Fry, go ahead.